formalities. We kindly request that delegates wear masks at all times during the meetings, unless they take the floor to intervene. To request the floor, please press the white button and wait for your number to be called. Then you can take the floor. The MA session will be broadcast live on YouTube, and the recording will be made available on the respective parties' MA webpage after the session. Parties will also be able to participate remotely through the COP26 platform. Yesterday, we had the chance to listen to 5 parties and engage in a constructive question and answer session. Today, we will build on this positive experience with a multilateral assessment of 5 additional parties: Monaco, Poland, Romania, Slovenia, and the United Kingdom. To ensure the effective time management of this session and taking into account the limited time available, parties under MA have prepared pre-recorded presentations that have been posted on the MA website prior to the session. I hope you have been able to view these presentations before this session. Today, each party will be asked to deliver a short statement, which will then be followed by questions. I will take a block of questions from several parties at once, and then ask the party under assessment to respond to these questions before moving to potentially a next round of questions. I will give the floor to parties under assessment as outlined in the schedule on the MA and the Climate Change Conference web pages. After the last party has been assessed, if time permits, I will take up any statements by parties regarding their experience in the IAR process. Saying this, I would like now to invite Monaco to make a short statement. This statement will be delivered by Jeremy Carles from the Government of Monaco. Mr. Carles, you have the floor. Number 16.
Okay. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here in face-to-face meeting to present our climate policy and the progress we have made in reaching our targets. I would like to share with you some elements. Monaco is the smallest country party to the Paris Agreement, with a territory of around 2 square kilometers, totally urbanized. Monaco has a population of 38,000 inhabitants. According to our last national inventory report, the global emission was evaluated at 82.6 kilotons CO2 equivalent in 2019. This is a 19.6% decrease since 1990. Regarding emission distribution in 2019, the main emissions are allocated within 3 categories: building, 35%, mobility, 30%, and waste, 27%. Concerning our commitments, on the 24th December 2020, Monaco submitted an updated NDCs with an objective of reduction of 55% by 2030. In complement, Monaco committed to be neutral carbon in 2050. The targets cover all sectors and all GIGs. To achieve our goals, Monaco implements important measures presented in the BR and in the pre-recorded presentation, in priority to reduce emissions from the 3 main sectors. Thank you, colleagues, for your attention, and we are pleased to answer to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Monaco. I would like now to open the floor for questions from the parties. I will collect a number of questions from parties before inviting the delegate from Monaco to respond. Number 10, the European Union, please.
Apologies. Thank you, Monaco, for your presentation and also for answering the European Union's questions. We have one more today. In your presentation, it is mentioned that a new waste management facility will be built, addressing environmental impacts and including a new sorting facility. Could you provide some more information on this waste management project, please? Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. The next party is the United Kingdom, number 60.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Monaco, for the presentation. And we were particularly interested in Monaco's efforts to encourage all citizens and businesses to play a role in your energy transition through the National Energy Transition Pact. We'd like to know if there were any challenges in encouraging people to sign up to the Pact, and what advice would you give to other parties considering such an approach? Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. The next party is Switzerland, number 57.
Switzerland thanks Monaco for presenting the fourth biennial report and answering the written questions. According to the information presented in the fourth biennial report, Monaco intends to put a ban on fuel oil for heating of buildings by 2022. Could Monaco elaborate in a bit more detail on the implementation of this measure? What buildings does it apply to, and in what way will existing buildings with a built-in fuel oil heating be affected? Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. The next party is Slovakia, number 27.
Thank you for the floor, and Monaco for the pre-recorded and short statement. I will reiterate myself from yesterday, but it is a pleasure to be able to discuss face-to-face after 2 years. Slovakia has 2 questions on for Monaco linked to road transport. In small countries, emissions from road transport sometimes fluctuate over time because of shifts in fuel prices between this country and its neighbors. Did you observe such effects in the emissions from road transport? If yes, did these shifts provide challenge to the implementation of your domestic transport policies? Thank you.
Thank you, Slovakia. The next party is Luxembourg, number 8.
Thank you, and thank you, Monaco, for the presentation, the recording, as well as the short statement today. I think quite a lot of questions have touched different sectors, so my question will be a bit more general. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of countries, including Luxembourg, is to correctly, accurately evaluate some policies and measures. And you got quite a lot of policies and measures, of course, in the transport sector, as we can see in the presentation. So I would like to know which policies and measures you succeed to evaluate, let's say, with a high confidence level, and which one are really causing you trouble for the evaluation of the impact of these policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Luxembourg. The next party to take the floor is number 65, China.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for Monaco for your presentation. We know that Monaco has experienced low emissions in waste incineration and construction sector in the history, but why have emissions increased in recent years? And can you give more information about the reason and how you're going to improve it? Thank you.
Thank you, China. And the next party is number 29, Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Monaco for the great presentation and for their interventions and responses. I would also like to point out that we have seen the response measure mentioned in the biannual update report, and I would like to ask for further elaboration on how this assessment was made. My French is not that good, the report is in French, but it says that response measures must be considered negligible. So I would just like an elaboration on that reference in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Monaco, you have the floor to respond to the questions. Number 16.
Thanks a lot for your questions. We'll try to answer to all of them. Concerning waste incineration plant, the new plant will be built by 2030 or between 2025 and 2030. The objective is to reduce our emission from the waste incineration sector, and different options are on the table to limit different pollutants and to limit the combustion of plastic by different ways. And one of the way is to enforce the legislation. I go to the Switzerland. The question from Switzerland concerning fuel ban. This is one of the main measures for reduce emission from building sector. Fuel is actually banned since 2003 for the new buildings, for heating and sanitary hot water uses, and now in 2022 fuel will ban for all the buildings, including existing buildings. We have to substitute fuel oil energy by connecting to heating and cooling network, or by electricity or natural gas.
Okay, thank you. I move back to the question by UK. Thanks for your question. On Energy and Transition Pact, this is one of the measures we take to involve public in our energy transition. It's quite important to involve also the private sector, and we are moving now for a second level of Energy Transition Pact that it will involve society, industries, but also the public sectors. Thank you. Then there are two linked questions on transport, and in fact, for a small country like us, it's very difficult to make an evaluation, a good evaluation of the measure taken with transport. As you know, it's based on fuel cell for the report, but we also make different evaluation, territorial, but also what is the impact of our vehicle park of the quality of the vehicle in Monaco. And but it's very, very difficult to evaluate the impact of the measure, because the fuel cell depends of effectively fuel price. Fuel price is a bit higher in Monaco, not because of taxes or things like that, but because it's a city, it's a big city, and the place it's more expensive to have facilities for distribution, and then you may have a lower price in France in the nearby city. So this may be one reason, but to evaluate our policies on transport. Sorry, we take quite a lot of measure. we take quite a lot of measures on transport, and we try to link the quality of the vehicle riding in Monaco, and we try to assess the evolution and try to correlate this evolution of the park on the fuel cell. But there is no direct correlation. But we undertake quite a lot of new policy on transport. Maybe we have a new carpooling system, Claxi, to boost car sharing, especially for commuters. We have Monaco electric car sharing services. We have a new extend electric bike sharing system. We have an application to centralize mobility passes. We have a post-COVID stimulus incentive, and we expect that 10% of our park will be electric or hybrid by the end of the year. And we have a program to replacement of hybrid city buses by electric buses. We expect to have a complete fleet by 2030. And we now initiate the use of biofuel for every truck.
I go to the question from UK concerning the National Energy Transition Pact. This pact was launched in 2018 by the government with the support of His Serene Highness, the Prince Albert II. It's a very important tool to mobilize the population in Monaco, and now the pact is signed by 1,500 persons and 200 companies, representing more than 25% of Monaco's employees. So we cover a large part of the population and the commuters. And this pact, Pomfret Charter and Sector Action Plan will be evaluated next year. I go to the question from Saudi Arabia. Monaco considers that the effect of our policies and measures compared to the global emissions are very, very negligible. So yeah, and the consequence on response measure are for us negligible.
And to answer to the question of China, why our emission increase, I think There was a little increase for many sectors. We think at first the use of F-gases. We have also a stagnation of the incineration of waste. And there was also, due to a big plan for construction in Monaco, the increase of fuel used for construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Monaco, for the answers to the questions. There is one more party that has requested the floor. It's number 44, Australia.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Noting the range of measures that you've stated are in place to advance sustainable transport, including clean mobility subsidies for electrical and hybrid vehicles. It's good to hear that you expect 10% of the fleet to be electric or hybrid by the end of the year. Our question is, what steps is Monaco taking to advance charging infrastructure to support the uptake of clean electric and hybrid vehicles?
Thank you, Australia. Monaco, number 16, you have the floor.
Okay. Oh, thank you. There was a plan quite a few years ago to oblige new construction to have recharging facilities. And now there is a green fund in Monaco to help and to work with our energy provider and to provide in all construction, but new facilities for electrical car. Also, public parking since about 10 years provide also free charging for vehicle. But now, as there is more and more vehicle, it will be challenging for this because it's also a question of security because we have parking under the building. So there will be some investment to make comptabilization of the electricity distributed in private and public parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Monaco. Thank you, delegates, for the questions, and thank you, Monaco, for the responses. I would like now to invite Poland to make a short presentation. It will be delivered by Paweł Rosicki from the Ministry of Climate and Environment. Mr. Rosicki, you have the floor. Poland, number 55.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you in person, and we are very pleased to take part in the multilateral assessment of our fourth biennial report and hope that our pre-recorded presentation was quite clear and informative. We are a part of World Climate Society since 1994 as a party to the Climate Convention. As for Poland, fulfilling climate policy goals is not an easy task, but as our energy mix is still based mostly on coal, and such high dependency on coal results mainly from historical and geographical reasons. However, despite this fact, we have fulfilled all our climate targets so far, and our projections shows that we will continue that trend in the future. The first period of the Kyoto Protocol, 2008-2012, Poland fulfilled individually with additional surplus of GHG emission reductions of 24% in relation to the base year of 1988. Our reduction commitments for the period from 2013 to 2020 are based on the internal EU legislation, as we are part of the EU since 2004. So according to this legislation, we was obliged to limit the emission increase in 2020 to 40% compared to 2005, as the target was set only for sectors not covered by the EU ETS scheme. So it was mainly transport, small combustion sources, agricultural waste. Taking into account the approximated 2020 emissions, Poland has performed the national ESD target using the cumulated annual emission allocations with small surplus. So we achieved 13.8% of emission growth. Such growth was done mainly by transport sector. With the GHG emissions as of approximated 2020 of 374 millions of CO2 equivalent, it shows that we reduced our emissions by over 35% compared to the 1988, and by 21% in relation to 1990. A decrease was observed in almost all economy sectors. Transport is the only sector in Polish economy with constant growth in the emissions, but other sectors are still reducing its emissions. As for now, our long-term reduction target covers only the non-ETS emissions, similarly to our 2020 target, and amounts to -7% in 2030 in relation to 2005. In recent years, many various climate actions were taken in Poland with noticeable increase of financial resources dedicated for such actions. And our projections shows that we will reduce our emissions by almost 30% by 2030 and by 43% by 2040. However, those projections were made with the, let's say, old one, EU target of 40% reduction in 2030. Now we are discussing the higher targets and the effort sharing. So I believe that our projections and our reductions will be higher. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you, Poland. I would like now to open the floor for questions from the parties. I will collect, as before, a number of questions from the parties before inviting the delegate to provide the answers. Number 47, India has the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. And at the outset, let me congratulate the distinguished delegate from Poland for the 4th BR, and also a very concise and precise and good statement that he made. We have just 3 small points. Our first point is that Poland is dependent on coal. Is there a plan on how this dependency will reduce, and is there a plan for phase out, and if so, by when? Since the BR says that emissions from coal will increase by 2030. Also, since coal is not the only fossil fuel, and we observe that natural gas consumption is also increasing substantially, is there a plan to reduce dependence on that also? Our second point is pertaining to table 5.28, page 142 of the 4th BR. Table 5.28, page 142. In this context, we were wanting to understand, could you please inform the reason behind the agriculture sector emission increase by 1,500 kilotons under the WEM, I mean with the existing measures, and WAM scenarios, with additional measures scenario, in 2040. Also, there is a LULUCF sink decrease by 17,750 kilotons under WEM and WAM scenarios. And our last point pertains to the fact that the party has duly reported mitigation estimates for some of the major policies and measures, except the agriculture and the forestry sectors. Could you please share what are the difficulties encountered in estimating the mitigation potential in these two sectors? Over to you, Chair, and once again, congratulations to Poland for a very good BR.
Thank you, India, for the questions. I would like now to give the floor to number 60, United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Poland, for the presentation and the information as well. You mentioned the success of the My Power Priority Programme to increase micro photovoltaic installations and work now being undertaken to make the programme even more effective. We'd be really interested to hear the lessons learned in developing a programme like this. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. The next part is the Republic of Korea, number 64.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, my question was exactly the same as the questions asked by the UK, so I think I will wait for the answers from Poland.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. The next part is number 29, Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Poland, for the intervention and the information provided in the statements. Thank you for the presentations as well, and congratulations on your submitting your biannual report. I would like to go again and ask on response measure. And the reason is the UNFCCC biannual reporting guidelines encourage parties to provide, to the extent possible, detailed information on the assessment of economic and social consequences of response measures. So I would like to know, has it been referenced in the report? If not, are there any difficulties associated with that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. The next part is China, number 65.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for Poland for your presentation. In our understanding, the climate goal of European Union is achieved through ETS and ESR with efforts from all member states, and Poland is one of them. And we are wondering, when European Union making the decision about the ESR, what kind of consultation will they have with Poland to guarantee the just and fair share of the goal? And our second question is that we know that on European Union level there is some climate policies, especially the policies about energy transition, and one of them is the decarbonization about the coal plants. So how this EU level climate policy will coordinate with the Poland domestic policies, and what kind of challenge are Poland facing now about the energy transition? Thank you.
Thank you, China. Poland, you have the floor for the answers, number 55.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all your questions. So I will try to answer all of them. If I will not be able, I will send an answer via the Secretariat. Starting from questions from India, how our dependency on coal will be decreased. According to our energy policy, we will share of coal in electricity production in 2030 will decrease to between 37 and 56%. It depends on the EUA's prices in the EU ETS. And in 2040, with the high CO2 prices scenario, we will have decrease to 11%. And with moderate CO2 scenario, our share of coal in the electricity production will be on the 28% level. So that's our projections for now. About the gas, we see the gas as a transition fuel while decreasing coal use. So indeed, our share of gas will slightly increase in the coming years. And agriculture increase of the emissions from agriculture is connected with the projected increase in the animal stock. So that's the main reason, and the decrease in the LULUCF is mainly caused by the changing age structure of our forests. So they will capture a little less in the coming years because of the age structure. UK and Republic of Korea question about my electricity program and the lesson learned so far. So I can tell that the program was a huge success, and the increase in our PV installations. There was a boom in the installations of photovoltaics installations in individual households. So we provide the co-financing of the installations in the form of grant up to 5,000 Polish zlotys, which was reduced to 3,000 zlotys in 2021. So it was dedicated to purchase and assembly of photovoltaic installations with 2 to 10 kilowatts capacity. And the lesson learned, so that such actions should be combined with the energy efficiency of houses increase, also with the installations of heat pumps. And individual charging stations in individual households. So we are planning to combine such actions with another programs that we are implementing right now to make it more efficient in the future. So that's the main lesson that was learned from the program. On the response measures, it's very important for us. However, the social and environmental aspects are firstly present in the impact assessment made to EU proposals, legislative proposals. After that, of course, as every member state has its own circumstances, its own national specificity. So we are assessing the impacts for Poland and for various regions of Poland, as some will be more affected by the climate policy, let's say, and we are together with the EU, with the Commission, will continue to engage on the impact of the implementation, and of course we will also do it on the national level. Especially in our case, it will be for Silesia regions, with its coal mining region. So we will collect data for some specific regions, especially. On the China questions about starting with the energy transition and the coal and the challenges, so especially social challenges. I've mentioned Silesia region that will be mostly affected by the climate transition. We've implemented just transition plans to to provide specific regions with adequate financial support for the transition, to provide new jobs, reskilling of workers, and so on. But I think that the social impacts is the most challenging one. It's connected with the transition, but also with the higher energy prices for the society. So some measures to deal with the high energy prices will also be needed. So that's the main challenges with the coal, with the reduction of coal in our energy mix. On the ESR and target setting under the effort sharing regulation on the EU level, of course, it's a normal procedure where all EU countries are engaged, and we've got long-lasting negotiations on various aspects of the regulations, and also on the level of targets attributed to each member state. For now, for Poland, I've already mentioned, until 2020 we were able to even to have growth in our emission, but our current target for 2030 is to reduce emissions by 7%. I hope that I've answered all the questions, but if not, please tell me if you need some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates, for the questions, and thank you, Poland, for your responses. I would like now to invite Romania to make a short statement. It will be delivered by Sorin Ionut Bansiu from the Ministry of Environment, Waters and Forests. Mr. Bansiu, you have the floor. Romania, number 23.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, it is a real pleasure to be here today with you and share Romania's evolution related to reducing GHG emissions. In this special context in which the multilateral assessment process takes place, we have shared through the recorded presentation Romania's progress on achieving the climate goals. The complex monitoring and reporting process at national level allows the determination of the outcomes necessary to analyze where we are and also what it is possible to achieve in the future. Considering the common efforts to achieve the climate goals, Romania believes in the strong benefits of the transparent multilateral assessment process, and we appreciate that it represents a significant contribution to a robust monitoring and reporting system. This kind of system should be available and applicable to all. We will continue to report in detail the results of our efforts to implement GHG mitigation policies and measures. At the same time, we welcome an open, transparent, and forward-looking process aimed at building trust among all parties through enhancing transparency of action. Romania has been reducing emissions continuously, the economic growth being decoupled from emissions since 2010. Our country implemented policies and measures that conducted to overachieving its individual target as a new member state and thus contributed to the EU's overall target. Coordinated by the EU, the response to the COVID-19 crisis will address the common challenges by implementing at national level an innovative plan that will allow a green, digital and just transition supported by deep reforms of the most important governance systems. As such, the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, recently approved, will enable a green economic and social recovery in line with the EU climate net zero target in 2050 and the new NDC of 55% reduction in 2030. The financing provided by the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility will support the implementation by 2026 of investments and reforms measures, and it totalizes 29.2 billion euros. From the total allocation, 41% will support the climate objectives, and this makes almost 12 billion euros. Thus, key reforms and investments will be implemented for Romania's green and digital transition. Let me share just a few relevant figures to better understand the ambition behind this plan. 250,000 polluting vehicles will be removed from circulation by Q2 of 2026, 30,000 new recharging stations by Q2 2026. 3.48 billion euros will be invested in railways. More than 2 billion euros invested in energetic renovation of public and private buildings. And we will decommission a capacity of 3,800 megawatts of coal power by Q4 2025. We will add 3,000 megawatts of renewable power capacity by Q2 2026. And we also would like to implement and to produce 100 megawatts of hydrogen power by 2025, and also a network of distribution related to this. We will start to implement these measures that will contribute to our common objective of greenhouse gas emission mitigation. The plan's design ensures that none of the involved measures will do significant harm to the environment. In this course of action, the stakeholders will be continuously involved in the implementation of the recovery and resilience plan in order to ensure ownership of reforms. Thank you for your attention, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you, Romania. I would like now to open the floor for questions from the parties. I will collect a number of questions, and then the floor will be given to Romania for the answers. United Kingdom, you have the floor, number 60.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Romania, for that presentation and for your submission as well. We were particularly interested in the creation of the working group on climate education, environment and sustainable schools, aiming to develop recommendations. We would be very interested to hear a bit more about those recommendations and any next steps on implementing those. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. The next party is China, number 65.
And thank you for Romania for your presentation. And we noticed that in your new arrangements for long-term emission reduction targets, you mentioned CBAM. So we'd like to know, like, is this as a part of EU package or your national policy instrument? And could you please share, like, the recent progress of the CBAM? Thank you.
We don't have anything else. The next party is India, number 48.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate Romania on submission of their BR and the presentation. I would like to ask about the increase in the transport and the waste sector emissions, whereas the total emissions have considerably reduced from 1990 levels. So can you please give reasons for substantial increase in the emissions from the transport and the waste sector? We would also like to know the good practices which you have followed, which has led to the reduction of around 45% in the methane emissions from coal handling between 2005 and 2018, which has been mentioned in your BR. So can you please share what are the critical restructuring actions which you have taken in this sector, which has led to this reduction? I would also finally ask about the reasons for projected increase in the agricultural emissions from 2020 to 2030. What do you think are the significant drivers which will lead to increases in the agricultural emissions? Once again, congratulations on submitting your BR. Thank you.
Thank you, India. Romania, number 23, you have the floor to provide the answers.
Thank you for your questions. I will try to answer them in the order that were addressed. Related to the question raised by UK, yes, this working group on climate education, also environmental education, was set up under the, let's say, auspices of the Romanian president, and a lot of stakeholders joined this working group. There will be a new strategy for education and also incorporating climate education at all levels of primary, secondary, and also high schools and universities. This is one of the main aspects that the Romanian President Klaus Werner Iohannis wants to develop and supports very much. Related to the second question of China, related to the CBAM mechanism, CBAM is a new regulation that will be implemented under the EU, and Romania is currently in negotiations, of course, with together with other member states in negotiating and understanding what will be the impacts of a CBAM in Romania. Of course, there will be challenges with the cement sector and aluminium and others, but we believe that we will find the right solutions to implement CBAM properly. Related to the question of India in the increase of emission in transport and waste emissions, these are the, I would say, transport is one of the main domain where emissions increased, and this is because there was a transition from railway transport to road transport. This part of the transport grew because of the economic development, of course, and it's also linked with the emissions in the waste sector because of increased consumption and, of course, let's say the negative component of economic development of Romania. Methane emissions from coal plants. This is an issue that it's incorporated in the fugitive emissions. I would like that one of my colleagues will answer in detail for this.
Yeah. So I will just add that the main reason for the significant decrease in the coal handling fugitive emissions was the significant decrease in the level of coal which was extracted and processed. Thank you.
And there was another question on agriculture emissions. Here we expect that animal stock will grow, and also the agriculture production, and this is why we project that the emissions will grow. Historically, the emissions of methane from agriculture dropped because of an historical decrease in livestock, but the projections are saying that we are going to that these amounts will grow in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Romania, for the questions. Thank you, Romania, for the responses, and thank you, delegates, for the questions. Now we're moving on to the next party. I would like to invite Slovenia to make a short presentation. It will be delivered by Martin Batic for the Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning. Mr. Batic, you have the floor, number 52.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the floor. We really appreciate that we have opportunity to have this meeting in person. The extremely rapid climate change we are experiencing in the last 4 decades has significant implications for the state and trends of all important natural systems. Slovenia is aware of the urgency to take actions against climate change. Therefore, we are making great efforts to minimize greenhouse gas emissions and have committed in our long-term strategy to be a climate-neutral society by 2050. The results of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is also reflected in the decoupling of economic growth and emissions in the period from 1992 to 2015. In Slovenia, the most important sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is the energy sector, which was responsible for just over 80% of total greenhouse gases emissions in 2017. Within the energy sector, the level of greenhouse gas emissions from transport remains a concern, even though emissions fell in 2017 by 3.4%. Slovenia's geostrategic transition location and dispersed settlements are national factor affecting mitigation potential in this sector. Events like the COVID pandemic we are currently experiencing could also have a significant, unique impact on emissions reduction in this sector, especially in transit countries. The European Union and its member states have made a joint commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The European Union's greenhouse gas inventory shows that internal EU greenhouse gas emissions fell by approximately 31% in 2020 compared to 1990. In Slovenia, emissions were below target every year in the assessment period 2013 to 2017. Slovenia significantly exceeded its target of plus 4% by 2020 compared to 1990 by reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 17.8%. According to the projections with measures, greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 are 80% lower compared to 2005, while in the projection with additional measures, they are 36% lower. As mentioned earlier, we should pay most attention to the transport subsector, which is projected to account for 38% of all emissions in 2030, followed by the energy subsector. Transport has been responsible for more than 10% of annual growth in the past, and in the future, emissions are projected to grow less or even decrease. However, the fact is that the projections for this sector are the most uncertain. The measures included in the projections with additional measures are measures to reduce transport activity, work from home, spatial planning, additional construction of rail infrastructure, especially for passenger transport, more intensive promotion of public passenger transport, walking and cycling, the use of biofuels, intensive electrification of passenger transport, and the use of synthetic gas for freight transport. They are expected to contribute the most of reducing emissions in this sector. Finally, affecting our transparent implementation measures and monitoring are of a paramount importance for tracking emissions. Monitoring the implementation and assessing the progress of measures to reduce greenhouse gases is a very complex and demanding task. In this context, I would like to mention the Slovenian Climate Action Mirror System, which has proven useful in tracking greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures at the national level. The system was developed as part of the Life Climate Path 2050 project and provides us with the opportunity to gain coherent, transparent and high-quality annual information on climate action in Slovenia. At the national level, we see the multilateral assessment at the international level, we see the multilateral assessment as a process with great value in providing a transparent and robust reporting and monitoring system that applies to all. A robust, transparent and forward-looking process is providing the basis for building confidence among parties while increasing transparency of action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Slovenia. I would like now to open the floor for questions from the parties. Again, I will collect a number of questions before inviting the delegate to provide the responses. The number is this? 57. Number 57, Switzerland, has the floor, please.
Thank you. Switzerland thanks Slovenia for their presentation and answering the written question. Our questions relate to the measures in the transport sector, where emissions in Slovenia have tended to increase the most, as you just told us. You have already mentioned how important the public transport is. Could you please indicate a little bit more in detail where Slovenia stands at the present with regard to the implementation of measures to improve the public transport infrastructure? And where do you see the greatest potential for lowering emissions through improvements in the public transport systems? Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. The floor goes to number 48, India, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would also join Switzerland in congratulating Slovenia for their BR as well as the presentation. One of my questions is also related to the public transport and the transport sector emissions, which is the major source of the emissions. So can Slovenia give us the plans for reducing these emissions? And secondly, we see that in the LULUCF sector, although the country is heavily forested with more than 58% under forests, but LULUCF emissions have been increasing over the years. Earlier it was a sink, but we see that now it's a source of emissions. So can Slovenia give reasons why this has happened and what measures it plans to take so that the sinks in the country increases further? Thank you.
Thank you, India. The next party to take the floor is number 60, the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you from us as well to Slovenia for your presentation. In your fourth biennial report, you discuss the use of the Eco Fund, which provides favourable loans to purchase large energy-efficient household appliances. We were interested in the interplay between consumer attitudes or finance, and which you found to be the bigger driver of uptake for those energy-efficient household appliances. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. The floor goes back to Slovenia for the responses. Number 52.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. I will try to answer all the questions, but if I will not succeed, we will also send answers through the Secretariat anyway. There was a question from Switzerland and India, which was quite actually going in the same direction. I would like to say that the main strategic document for transport in Slovenia, actually, which is Slovenian Transport Strategy, contains a list of measures, actually, which will participate in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. There is envisaged to improvement of the railway connection between Ljubljana, for example, between Ljubljana and Koper, and upgrade also the Ljubljana transport hub, what will actually also improve the public transport. The national program also contains specific action to implement the measures of the transport strategy, and for each action a clear timeline is defined and financial data are set. At the moment there is, or under the construction, the second track between Koper-Divača by 2026, and also special planning of the Ljubljana transport hub by 2030. I would like also to say this stage that the measures which are envisaged already in the Slovenian transport strategy, they are also taken up again in the long-term strategy and the national energy and climate probably just to continue that local and upcoming regional authorities currently play only a limited role in transport and transport infrastructure planning. It's connected mainly in the operation of local roads, infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians, and public transport and public management. Regarding the LULUCF, I would like my colleague Boštjan, if he provides us more information regarding that, why we actually observe decrease of CO2 sinks. Please, Boštjan.
Thank you. Thank you, India, for the question. Actually, we have received the same question from Switzerland prior to the COP. So the answer to this is quite simple and straightforward. So let's say in the past, Slovenia tends to increase both, I would say, forest cover as well as forest growing stock. In 2007, so the National Forest Program was adopted. And in this program, it was foreseen that allowable cut would be up to 75% of the increment. So, and this is, of course, then implemented through the forest management plans. And in the period from 2007 until 2013, I would say there was an increase in regular timber harvesting, and of course, consequently, the sink in the forest decreased a bit. In 2014, we have seen a large natural disaster. So we had so-called ice break, which severely affected our forests. And in the subsequent years, also we struggled with the bark beetle outbreak, and therefore the sanitation cuttings increased by more than 50%. This, of course, affected the ratio between, let's say, harvest and increment. Also, the natural mortality increased a lot, and this is the main reason for the carbon sink decrease. So hopefully this clarifies the trend in the LULUCF sector. Thanks.
Thank you, Boštjan. Probably I could add also on the question of India, which was before, that the main, I would also like to say that the main measures that will contribute to emissions reductions are electrification of passenger transport, use of hydrogen and synthetic gas in freight transport, use of biofuels, increasing share of public transport and freight on railway, increasing occupancy level in cars and trucks. Those are main drivers. Regarding the question of EcoFund, which was posed by UK, I can say that EcoSclat provides only soft loans to households for efficient household appliance, and there is not a lot of interest for households. The main measures for the households appliances is labeling and minimum requirements. I would also like to add that I think that's all which I would like to say, but if there is additional question, I'm prepared to explain more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Slovenia, for the responses. Thank you, delegates, for the questions that were placed. I would like now to invite the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to make a short statement. It will be delivered by Kate Hughes from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Ms. Hughes, you have the floor. I'm sorry, number 60.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, good afternoon and good evening to those watching the multilateral assessment today, and hello to all of my colleagues in the room. It's an honour to be here. I am Kate Hughes, Director for International Climate Change for the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in the UK Government, and it's great to be here to represent the UK. A great deal has happened since the UK last underwent our multilateral assessment in 2019. But one thing that hasn't changed is the value that the UK sees and derives from transparently communicating climate action to the global community, and that's remained of great importance to us. Reporting is integral to holding us all accountable for the delivery of our climate commitments under the UNFCCC. We know that transparency builds confidence. It showcases what action is being taken in the fight against climate change, the impact of which is already felt so acutely by populations around the world. Through collectively sharing climate actions, we promote international collaboration, capacity building and knowledge sharing. And that's why I'm very pleased to be representing the UK at its 4th multilateral assessment here at COP26. Since we last met in Bonn in 2019, the UK has achieved record clean growth and has met its challenging climate change commitments. Between 1990 and 2019, our economy grew by over 75%, while our emissions decreased by 44%. In 2019, the UK committed to a legally binding long-term target which commits us to achieving net zero GHG emissions by 2050. And at the end of last year, in our nationally determined contribution, we committed to reduce UK greenhouse gas emissions by at least 68% by 2030, compared to a 1990 baseline. The UK has also communicated its first adaptation communication and financed biennial communication. This year, we set our 6th carbon budget, covering 2033 to 2037, and that requires about a 78% reduction in emissions by 2035 compared to 1990. And just a few weeks ago, we published our net zero strategy, which we have submitted as our long-term low emissions and development strategy to the UNFCCC. This strategy sets out our vision for a net zero future, one with a thriving economy and cleaner environment where everything from the cars that we drive to the way we heat our homes has been transformed. The UK is proud of the progress we have made, but we also know that we need to do more. And we look forward to contributing to what we must and will be the decade of delivery. We know that there are also ways to improve, both how we communicate and the action that we are taking, and we are very keen to learn from others on how they are addressing the challenges that we hold in common. And that's why we've also found this multilateral assessment and facilitative sharing of views here in Glasgow so informative and constructive. And I'd like to thank parties for their time and effort. We have learned a lot, And also thank you to the chairs and vice chairs for their time and commitment as well. And I look forward to receiving your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom, for your statement. I would like now to open the floor for questions from the parties. Again, I will collect a set of questions and provide the floor to UK to provide the answers, to answer. The European Union has the floor, number 10.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you very much, the UK, for your presentation and also for replying to the questions, the written questions by the European Union, and also for hosting all of us here in this wonderful city of Glasgow. We have one question, it relates to your presentation. You say that the independent UK Climate Change Committee is one of the pillars of the UK climate policy framework. Could you briefly explain the role and importance of this committee in UK's climate policy, both from the policy development perspective and also from the implementation of policies perspective? Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. The floor goes to Monaco, number 16.
Thank you, United Kingdom, for your presentation. My question is related to the EU ETS regulation. You mentioned in your presentation that some sectors are covered by the EU ETS regulation. Could you please indicate the effect of the Brexit on the activities covered by these sectors and on the 21% reduction commitment? Thank you.
Thank you, Monaco. The floor goes to number 57, Switzerland.
Also, Switzerland thanks UK for their presentation and the very detailed and insightful answers to the written questions. The UK has set ambitious targets for 2020 and 2030, and its fourth biannual report demonstrates that it's well on track to achieve them. In addition, in June 19, the UK committed to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. In its fourth biannual report, the UK refers in several places to the transition to a net zero economy and the opportunities and potential benefits of this brings. Could you share with us some of the experiences gained and challenges faced in the process of developing your net zero strategy? And from your analysis, where do you expect the greatest challenges in implementing this strategy? Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. The floor goes to number 47, India.
Thank you, Chair. And at the outset, India thanks UK for hosting all of us in this beautiful city of Glasgow. And India is fully engaged in the process, and we are fully supportive of the efforts to produce equitable, tangible, and substantial outcomes for the COP26. I also take this opportunity to congratulate UK for their BR and a very insightful statement made by the distinguished delegate of UK. Congratulations. I have a couple of questions which I will very quickly list out. The first question is Table 1A, page 96 of the fourth BR, fourth BR, page 96, Table 1A. CO2 emissions from fugitive emissions from fuels have decreased by 39% in 2017 compared to 1990. However, emissions have increased by 23% in the last 5 years. Could you please share the reasons for this 23% increase? The other question is about Annex 1, table page 113 of the 4th BR. The mitigation impact estimate in 2020, 2025, 2030 shows that forestry policies mitigate the emissions. But 2035 estimate indicates that forestry sector's policies will no more be a sink. Could you kindly explain that? And also on the page 19, page 58, sorry, and table 19, the reason behind N2O emission increase in 2030 under the WEM scenario, almost double the increase is reported. It is about the waste sector that I am talking about. And on table 13, page 55, could you please explain why residential sector emissions are subjected to increase by 11 million ton in 2035 compared to 2017 under the WEM scenario? And our last point pertains to the use of natural gas, which has virtually stabilized in the last few years and is not reducing. Does UK have any plans to reduce its dependence on natural gas? And we are also very happy to see an assessment of the carbon budget implications in the UK's NDCs. So if there is an opportunity to share any data on that, and whether UK has any plans for reducing direct coal use in other industries and not just in power sector, and about biofuels, which are currently, I understand, being imported. How much does UK expect this to change, and are there challenges in these sectors? Once again, congratulations, and also many thanks for hosting us in this very ambient atmosphere. Thank you, Chair, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you, India. We will take one more party for questions, and then that will be the first block of parties, because there's another block of parties that have requested the floor. So, UK, you will provide the answers following to the questions raised by the party, the Republic of Korea, number 64.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, UK, for your valuable presentation. We have two questions. So first, UK has set a target of 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production by 2030. We would like to ask UK to elaborate on its strategy to meet such commitment and also expected challenges in the process. Second, UK has successfully reduced waste emissions by 71% between 1990 and 2019. Would you please tell us more about your experiences, including what could be the main drivers or key factors that have contributed to such achievement? Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. So now, United Kingdom, you have the floor for the first set of responses, number 60.
Thank you very much for all of those questions, and also for your kind words about Glasgow as well. It is indeed a beautiful city, even when it's raining very hard. At least we are in here and dry right now. So thank you for that. Let me start by saying, answering on the question about the EU ETS and the UK emissions trading scheme, and Monaco's question there, and thank you for that. So following a consultation in 2019, the four governments of the UK established the UK ETS in January 2021, so just earlier this year, as the UK's key carbon pricing policy after leaving the EU system. And we think that our UK ETS will promote cost-effective decarbonisation, allowing businesses, obviously, to cut emissions where it is cheapest to do so. And what we did is we set the UK ETS cap at 5% below the UK's expected notional share of the EU ETS cap for Phase 4, which was our way of signalling an increased level of ambition of the UK's carbon pricing policy, while also making sure there was a smooth transition for industry as well. As you know, and we'll touch on this, I'm sure, in discussing some of the other answers, we've committed in law to reduce emissions to net zero by 2050, and we see the UK ETS playing a very key role in achieving this. We'll consult on aligning the UK ETS cap with our net zero goals in due course. So we're also committed to exploring ways to develop the UK ETS in the future, and as well as consulting on that net zero cap, we'll be carrying out a review of free allocation to ensure it remains fair and proportionate. And we've committed to exploring how we can expand the UK ETS to other sectors as well, which I think was at the heart of your question there as well. At the moment, we don't currently include emissions or removals from forestry, but as set out in the Energy White Paper. But we do recognise the importance of all greenhouse gas removals in tackling climate change, and the UK government has committed to exploring how our scheme could incentivise the deployment of greenhouse gas removals as well. Our immediate priority is obviously to accelerate the development of robust, low-cost arrangements for monitoring, reporting and verification of emissions and carbon abatement projects, also in agriculture, so that we can unlock revenue streams for investment in cost-effective greenhouse gas abatement opportunities at that larger scale as well. From the EU, thank you for that question, and I think it's very interesting to look at the experience of the CCC in working with us to help set and to be that independent arbiter of advising us and informing us on our carbon budget framework as that independent view, and we certainly listen to them. They've also been very integral in working with us on our setting our NDC target as well. So the NDC that I talked about that we set out in December last year with at least 68% reductions, that was also informed by analysis that we had from the CCC. So they're a fundamental pillar of this framework which we have in the UK, linked to our Climate Change Act and looking at those carbon budgets as well. So they are also check up on our progress as well, and I might pass to a colleague in a second as well to help expand on some of that, because I think it also then links to the question that we had from Switzerland too, in terms of the benefits and the challenges that we have in terms of developing our net zero strategy, which obviously, I think it's fair to say that what we've seen in terms of the shift that we have looked at from going from where we were in terms of 80% reductions now being at net zero, so you have to look across the entire economy as well. There isn't anywhere to hide. Every sector has to play its part, and I guess that is part of the challenge for all of us in getting to net zero. Every sector of the economy has to be doing everything that it can. There isn't anyone who can say they are not part of that. So I think that's the big challenge, and we all know that some sectors are much harder to address than other sectors too. So I mean, we know that we have made great strides, for example, in the power sector. For example, we are now only at 2% of our energy, our electricity coming from coal now, but it was 40% a decade ago. So we've made great strides there. We're making great strides now through the net zero strategy in setting out how we're going to reduce emissions from our heating and building sector, from transport, from agriculture, and then bringing through technology such as hydrogen as well. Let me maybe pass, if it's all right, to my colleague Tony to say a little bit more as well about some of those benefits and challenges from the net zero strategy, but maybe just a little bit more on the benefits. You know, obviously, what we see in this transition is the importance of doing it in an orderly way, so that we can bring sectors with us, but also in a just and inclusive way, so that we are providing the high quality jobs and growth of the future too. And we're very clear that we want to work with businesses to grow those green industries and to grow those supply chains in the UK, and that we're looking at supporting up to 440,000 jobs across net zero industries by 2030. And that will contribute towards that broader pivot as well to a greener economy, which could support 2 million jobs in green sectors, or by greening existing sectors as well. Approximately 6.3 million jobs in the UK, that's about 1 in 5, are likely to be affected by the transition to a green economy. And the impact of that transition to net zero, you know, could be significant. But what we've been looking to do is to make sure that we are building those skills now, as I said, doing this in an orderly way. So although actually what we see is the net macroeconomic impact is likely to be small in 2050 relative to total growth over the period. And impacts between and within regions over the next 3 decades can vary. So we're also looking at what this means across the UK in terms of our different regions. And our approach will need to reflect that benefits and impacts of the transition will be dependent on individual household characteristics, such as their housing type and current vehicle usage, to support those low-income households most affected by individual technology transitions. I might pass to Tony to say a little more on CCC and the net zero strategy. Thanks.
61, please.
Hi, my name is Tony Ripley. I work also in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in the Net Zero and Carbon Budgets team. So as Kate said, the Climate Change Committee is an independent body that was established under the UK's 2008 Climate Change Act. The duties of the CCC are set out in the Act, and there are kind of 5 key duties. As Kate mentioned, providing advice on our long-term emissions target. So before we set our net zero target, the CCC provided comprehensive advice on how, across all sectors of the economy, emissions could be reduced. And you can find the report on that on the CCC's website. As Kate also mentioned, we got similar comprehensive advice on setting each of our carbon budgets since 2008, the latest being Carbon Budget 6. So I think about 6 months before we set the level for Carbon Budget 6, we received the CCC's advice, and then government follows its own process of reviewing the advice and doing its own modelling, deciding on its own approach to reducing emissions and which plans and policies the government wishes to pursue to achieve the level that the CCC suggests. We've always accepted the level that the CCC has said we should set. We don't always follow exactly the policies and plans they think are the most appropriate. We retain that flexibility for the government, but it obviously gives a good analytical basis for both setting the target and where we might find the emission reductions. As Kate also mentioned, the CCC has a role in monitoring progress across government. So every year they publish a report to parliaments that gives recommendations to departments across government on where it can act, where further emission reductions can be found, and the government is under a duty to respond to that report and the recommendations made within it. And our latest response came alongside the net zero strategy last month. The CCC has a dual role, though. It not only provides advice on mitigation, but also on adaptation. assessing progress in adapting to climate change in the UK, and provides further advice on climate risks. So there's a climate change risk assessment undertaken every 5 years, which assesses the current and future climate risks facing the UK. And every 2 years, the CCC produces an assessment of the progress in adapting the UK to deal with current and future climate risks. The final role of the CCC is in providing responses to ad hoc requests by the government. We ask for advice on setting the NDC, as Kate mentioned. It also provides advice to our devolved administrations on their own targets under climate legislation in Scotland and Wales, and also provides advice to Northern Ireland. I think just to add to Kate some other of Kate's remarks, I think we had a question from India on reducing coal use in industry. We published industrial decarbonisation strategy earlier this year, and that sets out a number of ways that we're reducing emissions in industry, and that's partly through, I think as Kate mentioned, new business models for hydrogen and for carbon capture and storage. And we've announced 2 clusters where we're pursuing different approaches to reducing emissions through through hydrogen, CCS, and energy efficiency, and all of those will reduce coal use or the emissions from coal use. Thanks.
Thank you.
Number 60.
Thank you. I wondered if I could just ask my esteemed colleague from India to repeat his question on carbon budgets, that we can make sure that we answer that as fully as possible.
Of course, number 47, India, you have the floor.
Thank you to the distinguished delegate of UK. On carbon budget, I think you have given a fairly good idea about the institutional process that you have. The question was about UK's fair share of the remaining carbon budget for a 1.5 degrees centigrade. But I think the general process that you have shared is fine. We would just take this opportunity to, if you want, we can repeat those table numbers and page numbers of the 4th BUR for the rest of the questions. But for carbon budget, it is very heartening to note that you have a team now and that you are tracking it, and all that we were wanting to understand was about, UK's own fair share of the remaining carbon budget for a 1.5 degrees centigrade. But that besides, we got some idea now about what you people are doing. And if this opportunity is to be taken by me to repeat those page numbers, then I can do so. Please advise us.
UK, number 60, you have the floor.
There we go. Thank you very much to my colleague from India for that clarification, and no need to repeat the page numbers and the tables. We've captured those, and I will do my best to answer those questions now, and thank you very much for your comments on the carbon budget as well. I'm glad that we could provide some clarification and reassurance on the work that the UK is doing through our carbon budget process. So you had a number of questions on the data that we had provided, and we'd be happy to follow up if we don't cover all of the detail here. On LULUCF, so afforestation are important policies to contribute towards our net zero strategy. As I said earlier, we have to make sure that we are covering every single sector in our move towards net zero. And the emissions reported in Table 3 correspond to the short-term losses from soil carbon estimated by our modelling. On the long term, afforestation policies are expected to deliver large sinks. The UK government and our devolved administrations have committed to a significant increase in planting of forests to enhance carbon storage and biodiversity as well. And our Nature for Climate Fund in England is investing over £500 million towards our aim of trebling the woodland creation rate in England, contributing towards an overall UK target of 30,000 hectares of trees by the end of this Parliament. I should have probably clarified earlier as well that the increase in CO2 emissions in 2012 to 2017 were due to upstream oil flaring, but the CO2 emissions from flaring then by 2019 were back down to 2012 levels. On the your N20 question, we would like to provide a written answer to that if that is agreeable to my colleague from India, and if so, then we would draw on the Secretariat to facilitate us in doing that. We do think that our CO2 fugitive emissions are relatively modest with respect to national totals. So just to clarify as well, in 2019, the emissions from upstream oil and gas flaring were 1% of UK CO2 emissions. So I think hopefully that covers those very helpful questions. Let me turn to the question that we had from the two questions from South Korea. First of all, on hydrogen and our experience of this. So the net zero strategy that we've already mentioned in our answers today confirms our government's twin track approach to supporting both electrolytic green and carbon capture CCUS enabled blue hydrogen production. So the UK is well positioned to secure a competitive advantage in both green and blue hydrogen, with the largest offshore wind sector in the world, natural assets and expertise in carbon capture and storage, and with UK companies already at the forefront of hydrogen technology development. During 2021, we are going to gather further evidence through our consultations on a hydrogen business model, the Net Zero Hydrogen Framework and the UK Low Carbon Hydrogen Standard, and undertake additional work on our production pathway in line with the likely ramp-up in production required for Carbon Budget 6, to give us a better understanding of that potential production, the mix of those production technologies. And just maybe to give a quick example of some of the policies that the UK will implement, we will develop further detail on our hydrogen production strategy and twin track approach, including less developed production methods, and we'll be doing that by early 2022. And we have an ambition for 5 gigawatts of UK low carbon hydrogen generation production capacity by 2030. And we intend to confirm design of a low carbon hydrogen standard and implement the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund and finalise a hydrogen business model also in 2022. And that's also building on our hydrogen strategy as well. In relation to the questions on waste and our experience there as well, and thank you for kind of noting that too. We're continuing to explore policies to work towards sort of the near elimination of biodegradable municipal waste to landfill by 2028. And to support this, we're bringing forward £295 million of capital funding, which will allow our local authorities in England to prepare and implement free separate food waste collections for all households from 2025. And our latest data shows that in 2019, the waste management accounted for about 4% of total UK greenhouse gas emissions under our national inventory, with methane emissions accounting for about 90% of that. So it's a significant sector, and as I keep on saying, you know, we need to make sure that we are acting across all of these. So the vast majority of these emissions come from that breakdown of biodegradable waste in landfill sites. And this demonstrates a significant achievement of decreasing those emissions by 71% between 1990 and 2019, which is a significant reduction, as I'm sure you'll agree. The resources and waste strategy, which we had in 2018, announced, alongside other measures, proposals for 3 significant reforms to that waste system in England. And that's first of all, the introduction of a deposit return scheme for drinks containers. Secondly, extended producer responsibility for packaging. And thirdly, consistency in household and business recycling collections. So all of those are part of our waste strategy, and that's our experience, and all of that has helped to contribute towards the reductions that I have just mentioned as well. And the measures will now are projected to deliver a combined carbon emission savings in the waste sector of over 30 million tonnes of carbon CO2 equivalent between 2023 and 2035. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. We're now going to take the questions from the second block of parties. The first party is number 29, Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, UK, for the excellent presentation. Thank you for the answers thus far. This is happy to be here, and this is going to be just a short question. Regarding the presentation, on one of the slides, you mentioned challenges experienced along with some successes. In the challenges, you have harnessing business ambitions. Could you please elaborate on some of the challenges maybe encountered in harnessing business ambitions, and if there are potential measures that you'll take to overcome these challenges? Thank you very much. Just for the benefit of the party. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. The next party is Japan, number 46.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the UK for your wonderful presentation and the statement today, and also hosting us to this beautiful city of Glasgow. We'd like to ask about the measures to reduce emissions in the residential sector. So emissions from the residential sector under the WEM scenario are projected to increase to 2035. And the UK analyzes this reason that is due to the population growth and a continuous trend for households to be smaller, which offsets the impact of reduction policies, such as improved insulation of homes. Under these circumstances, what additional measures does the UK consider to reduce emissions from the residential sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. The next party is Luxembourg, number 8.
Thank you, UK, for the presentation and already the very detailed explanations you gave today. So, in all your explanation, speaking about decarbonization in English, of the economy, you mentioned hydrogen, you mentioned different measures, but I didn't hear anything about nuclear power plant. Are you going to use still that in your mix, but in a decreasing way, or do you have planned to keep it as even in the long term as one of your elements to go to net zero emissions? And then on another other topic, I would like to ask you, it's available on your website. This is my 2050 tool where you can play and do scenarios moving different variables. It's a very interesting tool, and I recommend everyone to have a look on that because it's very nice. And you can also download a very complex Excel file, the McKay carbon calculator. And I was wondering if you use this. Of course, it is a tool to define scenarios, not really to do projections or evaluate PAMs, but are you using that in a certain way in your projections or in your PAMs evaluation? Thank you.
Thank you, Luxembourg. The next party is number 65, China.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor, and thank UK for the presentation and your efforts in hosting the COP26. Firstly, we want to appreciate the first introduction of low-carbon economy concept from United Kingdom and its contribution to the global low-carbon transitions. And we congratulate that energy transition in UK has also made remarkable progress since the 1960s for the last century. And we have 2 questions for the United Kingdom. The first is that it is noted that DECC, Department of Energy and Climate Change, was previously responsible for climate change in UK. But this department was abolished before. At present, BEIS is mainly responsible for climate affairs in the UK. We understand this is a national decision and arrangement, but we would like to understand the considerations behind this arrangement and what are the benefits and successful experience of having BEIS manage climate change. And the second question is, that we congratulate to the UK for your achievement in greenhouse gas emission reduction, and we also noticed that the agricultural and transport sectors have not been able to achieve noticeable emission reductions. So could you please give some information about the challenge and problems in achieve reduction in these sectors? And also in your target, you mentioned that you want to achieve all cars must be fully zero emission capable by 2035. And could you please give more information how to achieve this goal? At last, we share the same interest of EU in CCC, and we thank UK for the detailed explanation on its role and influence. China also has a committee on climate change, and we think it can be a good base and opportunity for our bilateral cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Thank you, China. The next part is Australia, number 44.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the UK for your presentation and for hosting us here in chilly Glasgow. Australia notes that this year the UK legislated its sixth carbon budget, a target that will reduce emissions by 78% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. Our question is, what does the UK see as being the biggest challenge in achieving the emissions reductions required in the time between its fifth and sixth carbon budget? Thanks.
Thank you, Australia. United Kingdom, you have the floor for the second block of parties' questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of those questions. A good range of questions there, so I will try and answer them all quite quickly because I'm also conscious of the time, Chair, as well. So let me race through them. So kicking off with perhaps the question on nuclear power plants from my colleague from Luxembourg. So yes, it is very much definitely part of our plans and our 10-point plan and in our net zero strategy. And our intention that we announced recently, very recently, is that by 2035, the UK will be powered entirely by clean electricity, subject to security of supply. And linked to that, we will secure a final investment decision on a large-scale nuclear plant by the end of this Parliament and launch a new £120 million future nuclear enabling fund, retaining options for future nuclear technologies, including small modular reactors as well. And that's alongside a whole range of other renewable sources as well that we'll be looking at. You also asked about the 2050 calculator, which is indeed an excellent initiative, and the Mackay carbon calculator, and that very much is our way of partly helping to bring other people into the choices and the trade-offs that you talked about in terms of looking at different scenarios and what those look like. But the data underlying that is the data that we use in our calculations as well. And I should probably point out too that we've worked with many other countries on developing their own 2050 calculators or equivalents, and there's also a global calculator as well. So thank you for flagging it, and it's a product which we're very proud of, and we would recommend to others as well. And I know a number of other colleagues in this room we have worked with to draw together those calculators. In terms of the questions on businesses and our ambitions there from my colleague from Saudi Arabia, thank you for that. And and yes, I think we all understand that there's definitely challenges in moving to net zero, and we are all working that through with our countries as well. We are committed to continuing to support UK businesses to meet their net zero commitments, including exploring a government-led advice service that consolidates and simplifies advice and other support on how businesses can get to net zero. And we are very keen to make sure that green choices are affordable and easy by working with businesses and industry to set strong regulatory signals and collaborate to reduce costs and provide better quality, longer lasting and lower environmental impact products and services. I think one of the things that we found too is that actually through the carbon budgets that I've talked about and setting net zero in legislation and being so clear about that, actually that's something which businesses find incredibly useful as well in terms of their planning. They know exactly what we are asking, exactly where we are going, and by sending those signals it does mean that they are able to plan and invest and work alongside us in terms of making their own decisions. And that's alongside, you know, a whole suite of different incentives and moves on things like the task force on climate-related financial disclosures as well, where we're working obviously with the financial sector on that side too, in order to make sure that everything that we're doing is aligned with our net zero targets as well. I should probably also mention what we're doing to support small and medium-sized enterprises as well, which are often, you know, have a very different set of challenges to the larger businesses in the financial sector. And we are, you know, we know that they want to work to tackle climate change, and what we have is a small business campaign in order to help them understand the steps that they can take towards net zero and also access the support that is available to them. So again, we're just trying to make that as easy as possible, and we are exploring a government-led digital advice service that consolidates and simplifies that advice, funding and other support on net zero. Let me just take a moment to check where I am in terms of answering all of the questions.
Yeah, 60.
Thank you for the question from colleagues from China and your question about our Department of Energy and Climate Change, which has now become our Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And I was a member of DEC, and I'm now a member of BEIS. And I mean, the decision in brief is that actually a huge advantage in bringing together our climate change and energy sort of ministerial responsibilities with our Department of Business and Economy, because I think, as we've all said through today's session and as we are talking about here in Glasgow, actually that interplay between delivering climate change, on addressing those challenges of energy and of looking at how we do that in a way which also provides jobs and growth is absolutely critical. So we see huge synergies in being the department which brings together those industrial sectors, the businesses, the whole sort of look across the economy, as well as with our climate change, which is both domestic and international in that department. You also asked about some of the sectors as well, so on zero emission vehicles. So we have a zero emission vehicle mandate to improve consumer choice and ensure we maximise the economic benefit from this transition by giving a clear signal to investors. And that will help deliver on our 2030 commitment to end the sale of new petrol and diesel cars, and our 2035 commitment that all new cars must be fully zero emissions capable. And to support that, we have further funding of £620 million for zero emission vehicle grants and electric vehicle infrastructure, including further funding for local electric vehicle infrastructure and a focus on local street residential charging as well. So that's what we are doing in order to sort of spur further reductions in this transport sector as well. There were questions about the challenges for Carbon Budget 6, and I will, from Australia, and their question about chilly Glasgow. I can't answer the question about how chilly Glasgow is. It's certainly beautiful, as other people have said, but I'm sure coming from Australia, it may well feel quite chilly here today. But Tony, can I pass to you on the Carbon Budget 6 question?
Number 61.
Mic 61.
Thank you. Working in the team that worked on agreeing carbon budget 6 across government and getting the policies and plans in place in the net zero strategy that will help to deliver carbon budget 6, it feels like the biggest challenge was actually the work across government to get those policies and plans in place. I don't think we've seen the biggest challenges yet because they will lie in implementation. We have a comprehensive strategy that looks across government. I think the benefit of setting a net zero target that really kind of galvanised all parts of government to think not where should the emissions be found, but emission reductions be found, but how do we reach net zero in each sector, and how do we get there in the most cost-efficient way? And that has driven, I think, a different mindset for setting carbon budget 6, which is runs from 2033 to 2037, and we have to achieve around 78% reduction in emissions across that period from 1990. And so, as I say, because we have that trajectory and we know what we need to do in each sector, because we're looking at the end game for 2050, I think it has made each government department look at what needs to be done in their sector to get there to 2050, and therefore has helped us find, what's the right way what's the right trajectory to reach by the mid-2030s when decisions need to be taken on some of the trickier issues. And we've published a range of strategies across government in different sectors this year ahead of the net zero strategy, and I'd encourage you to read them all. I just wanted to add a little bit on heat and buildings and domestic energy efficiency, because I think that was asked as well. We did publish a heat and building strategy alongside the net zero strategy, looking at how we can support households in making the transition to net zero, and announced a new £450 million boiler upgrade scheme with £5,000 in capital grants, and also we're consulting on a new market-based incentive for heating system manufacturers to be introduced from 2024, while also investing 60 million in heat pump innovation to make them beautiful, smaller and easier to install, because we are conscious of the challenges for households too in supporting the transition to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates, for the questions, and thank you, United Kingdom, for your responses. Dear colleagues, I would like to remind you that the individual party record for each of the 10 parties that has been multilaterally assessed during this session will be made available on the party MA webpage. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the SBI Chair for the joint closing of MA and FSV. Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Professor Kartalis. Dear colleague, I would firstly like to extend my deepest gratitude to Vice Chair Ambassador Yu and Additional Rapporteur Professor Kartalis for sharing the FSV and MA here in Glasgow. I would also like to extend my thanks and congratulate you all for actively engaging in these very fruitful and positive discussions. Specifically, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the 17 countries that underwent FSV and MA here. The exchange of information between parties has shown that your keen interest in learning from each other, in sharing experiences, and in improving the EAR and ECA processes. Over the past 2 days, I was also pleased to hear parties sharing experiences and lessons learned from the ECA and AR processes. We have heard that expert review teams can bring valuable international experience to parties they assess. We also heard that national experts benefit from participating in these processes, gaining capacity and skills to participate in reporting and review of other parties. And we have heard that these processes can encourage parties to better coordinate their work and report on their progress, and that the outcome of their efforts helps raise awareness of governments to the importance of these processes under the UNCCC. Now, turning to the multilateral assessment, we have heard 10 developed country parties regarding their progress towards their quantified economy-wide emission reduction targets. I am happy to see that most parties have made good progress towards the 2020 targets, but also happy to see that parties are looking ahead to 2030 and 2050 and beyond. We have heard about plans for carbon neutrality as well as specific measures parties are using to decarbonize their economies. Some of the key policies and measures that stood out include green economic transition plans, national energy and climate plans, carbon taxes, advances in carbon capture and mineralization, boosting public transportation and e-mobility, grants for electric vehicles and expanding charging infrastructure, and multi-stakeholder platforms and coordination with municipalities. Now, when we turn to the FSV, we have also heard from 7 developing countries. We have heard that developing countries are increasingly adopting innovative mitigation strategies and policies, rolling out regulations and projects aiming at harnessing the potential of solar and wind resources and revising sharply upwards the renewable energy targets. We have heard that developing countries are steadily improving their GHG inventories, and most of them have already adopted the 2006 IPCC guidelines to report GHG emissions in the BURs, or are planning to do so in the next BUR. Nevertheless, difficulties do remain with gathering national activity data of developing country-specific emission factors. We also heard that strengthening of domestic MRV system is considered essential for tracking the implementation of the existing climate policies and setting the foundation for the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. Developing countries started mainstreaming climate change into national and subnational planning and budgeting. And now, before I formally close the FSV and MA sessions, it is my pleasure to introduce a distinguished guest who will deliver some closing remarks. I will now give the floor to the Executive Secretary of the UN Climate Change Convention, Madame Patricia Espinosa. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all of you. It is really great to see all of you here. It's a pleasure to speak with you at the end of your discussions today and at the end of the first week of the COP here in Glasgow. It's really great to see all of you. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for having kept the process moving forward and for participating in the virtual discussion last year. It has been a very challenging and difficult situation for all of us. It has been difficult in terms of the time zones where we have been operating, of the many hours that we have spent in front of our screens. I really want to tell you that it has made a difference, because it has allowed us to show that in spite of the pandemic, in spite of all the difficulties, the commitment to address climate change is there. Also for coming here to Glasgow under difficult conditions, travel conditions, and then you may have also experienced some difficulties in accessing the venue. In part, it is a result of, how many people have wanted to come, which is good. I take it as a very positive sign because it shows people want to be here, want to be part of the conversation, want to be there where this very vital issue is addressed. But if any of you, or to those of you who may have endured some difficulties, please accept my apologies and just know that we have been making every effort to provide a safe and healthy space for all of you. And we will continue to try to make as many adjustments as possible so that you can continue your work. Those of you who will stay here for some more days, we will continue, and we stand ready to listen to any suggestion that you may have in that regard. So one thing that we know has not changed is, of course, the need for continuous progress in fulfilling the commitments under the Paris Agreement and continuing to build climate ambition. And that brings us to today and here. So thank you again for not only showing leadership, but transparency and openness throughout this process. And this has included, of course, the two processes, the facilitative sharing of views, highlighting efforts by developing countries, but also the multilateral assessment focusing on developed country actions and targets. By highlighting progress made and identifying where further effort is needed, these platforms help to build trust among countries and encourage further action. I also know that these year's exchanges have been held in an extremely positive and respectful atmosphere, and I want to thank you for that in spite of all the conditions that we are all having to endure. I'm happy to note that based on the information received, the 3 developed country parties that have participated in the multilateral assessment have increased efforts not only to meet their own targets, but also striving to support global efforts, and that most developed countries are on track to meet their 2020 climate targets, and some have set even more ambitious targets for 2030 and beyond, and that is, as we know, what we need, what we urgently need. We heard examples of how parties are working towards climate neutrality by 2050 and transitioning to a green and sustainable future. Turning to the facilitative sharing of views workshop, 7 parties have participated. And here we also saw positive developments. Developing countries show that they are also playing a key role in climate actions, which is critical to reaching the collective goals of the Paris Agreement. In addition, through enhanced transparency of action and information exchange, developing countries are providing greater clarity on their national efforts. The international consultation and analysis process has also proven to be a helpful experience for parties to identify capacity building needs. Reports show that developing countries are also making significant progress with respect to implementing climate actions and pledges. We heard examples of countries setting increasingly ambitious renewable energy targets and others that have started decoupling their economic growth from carbon emissions. With this knowledge, parties are in a better position to enhance their ambition, further contributing to the goals set out in the Paris Agreement. And as we are meeting here in Glasgow with the clarity that we are still very far from where we need to be in order to keep the 1.5-degree goal within reach, this exercise is extremely, extremely relevant. So, dear friends, it is my hope that today's meetings will help provide a clearer picture of where we currently stand and how urgent it is for all parties to work together to reach the objectives of the Convention and to achieve success here at COP26. Again, we appreciate this SBI session. I want to thank the SBI chair for her leadership, for her dedication. I thank also the rapporteur for having also exercised the conduction of the sessions. I want to thank also my colleagues in the Secretariat for their hard work in making this session a very successful one. And I encourage all of you to keep moving forward for a healthier, greener, and more sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Yep. This deserves. You do deserve an applause for that. Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary, for those very encouraging words and also highlighting the central role of the international MRV framework for increasing climate ambition, so enabling us to get closer and closer to the goals in the Paris Agreement and to enhancing climate ambition. And by that, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, I would like to close the facilitative sharing of views and the multilateral assessment. Thank you very much.